Hello everyone, this is Dan. I've decided to go ahead and make a video concerning how the coronavirus is impacting my state, the sort of distribution of the virus throughout Ohio, and I wanted to basically talk about some of the opinions I have on what's going on with the coronavirus in my state, but also this applies to, I think, most other states, because I think what we're seeing in Ohio is pretty typical for what's going on in most of the other states throughout the US. So I kind of am going to break this video down into a describe and then discuss format, which means I'm going to talk about the virus and its impact on Ohio, and then I'm going to give my analysis as to what I think we can really see going on and sort of my concerns about everything that's happening in my area with regard to this coronavirus. So here's a map showing the distribution of coronavirus cases so far throughout the state of Ohio. And I'll put a link to that map in the description bar. But I just wanted to briefly talk about what we can see as general trends as far as how many people have the coronavirus in different areas. More or less, it's what we can expect it to be, I think, what we would expect it to be, which is the bigger cities, the areas with more urban populations, have the vast majority of cases. So you can see Cuyahoga County has the most. The map that I'm going to put up is from April 6th and comes from Rich Exner of Cleveland.com. But as you can see, there are 4,450 cases at the time that I'm making this video that are confirmed. And Cuyahoga County has the most. Like I say, that's Cleveland. Then Franklin County is second. It has 644 cases compared to Cuyahoga's 871. And Hamilton County, which is Cincinnati, is in third place. Not that you want to be in the top three at all, but there are just under 400 cases in Hamilton County. And so you can look at some of the more rural areas. There are actually counties that have no confirmed cases still, although there are few in number. And then there are a lot of counties that are just in the single digits or around 10 or so in terms of the number of confirmed cases. So it's kind of what you'd expect, because obviously this virus is super contagious and it's going to spread more quickly within the urban populations. And that's why we see more people around Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, and the other areas have it compared to more rural areas throughout the state. Now, there are a few exceptions to this. Mahoning County has 272 cases. It's in far northeastern Ohio, compared to Montgomery County, which is in southwest Ohio, which only has 109 cases by comparison, although that number has gone up quite a bit over the last day or two, I think. Mahoning County is Youngstown, and Montgomery County is the county that Dayton is located in. And Montgomery County has quite a few more people than Mahoning County. So that's kind of an exception. I'm not sure why there's more of a concentration up there around Youngstown compared to the Dayton area. But then again, at the same time, that could be just because that's where we've seen more reports. It could be that more cases have been evaluated in Mahoning County than Montgomery County so far. And that also might explain why the number for Montgomery County, I believe, has gone up quite a bit over the past couple of days. So that doesn't tell us anything definitive. I think the main thing to take out of the map is it's pretty much what we would expect. The more urban areas are having to endure a lot more cases of the coronavirus so far than the more rural areas where the population isn't as high and people don't come into as close contact as often, and so the virus has less of a chance to spread, at least within a short period of time, in the more rural areas. So again, I think it's pretty much what you'd expect it to look like. Now, as far as what's being done so far in Ohio, basically the main thing that our state is doing, like a lot of other states, is that we have a stay-at-home order where people are only supposed to venture out to get things that are of necessity, such as, groceries, or basically mostly just food products. But anything else, like you have to go to the pharmacy, that's allowed. But for the most part, we're not supposed to leave our home. There's a stay-at-home order unless it's an absolute necessity to go out. Now, this isn't really being enforced in most cases. No one's stopping to check people for their reason to venture out and all that, but that theoretically could be possible under this stay-at-home order. Now, The other side of the coin with this stay-at-home order is only essential businesses are supposed to be in operation as long as this stay-at-home order is in place. So if you look at the list of stay-at-home businesses, and again, I'll include a link to this in the description as well. It's from John Fay of the Cincinnati Enquirer. There are a lot of different businesses, the list is fairly extensive, that are considered essential according to this order. And I'm not going to read all of them. Anybody that wants to look at the detailed list can. But basically, grocery stores, pharmacies, licensed marijuana production and agriculture businesses, so businesses that are part of the marijuana industry, are considered essential. The media, gas stations, which makes sense, hardware stores, supply stores, so like Lowe's and Home Depot and places like that are still open. Laundry services, restaurants for consumption off premises, so carry out and delivery services, fast food. Restaurants, they're still allowed to maintain business. They're still allowed to be open. And you can go through, like I say, hotels. You can read the whole list. Businesses that are in manufacturing or distribution and supply chain for critical products and industries. In other words, trucking businesses, of course, essential. And so on it goes. So basically, those are the two main things that are being used to try to limit the spread of the coronavirus in my area. That you're not supposed to leave your home unless it's absolutely essential, unless it's necessary, and businesses are not supposed to be open unless they're considered essential businesses. So I think I've done a fairly good job at describing what the policy is in Ohio now, as far as trying to limit the spread of this coronavirus and kind of what the overall situation is. Again, it's pretty similar to, I think, what you see in a lot of other states. So now that I've described this, I want to go ahead and give my kind of analysis and opinion overall about all the stuff that we're seeing and kind of the things that I disagree with that I think are really kind of not being done the way that they should be. But again, this is just my opinion and analysis at this point. I don't think that these measures are going to really be enough in the coming weeks to really gain the upper hand on this coronavirus. And the reason why I think this is, when you look at the list of so-called essential businesses, it includes so many people, so many different types of jobs that are not really essential in the short run. And in some cases that aren't essential at all, like fast food workers. Those are not essential jobs. They should not be classified as essential on this list because it's just not reasonable to think that they are essential. Marijuana industry workers, hardware stores, if you work at the Home Depot, you're considered essential. How is that essential? Over the long run, yeah, you might say that you need to have those kinds of stores open to make repairs, but in the short run, no, those aren't essential businesses, not in a pandemic. So I think what's going on here is the government wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to say that we are protecting people by telling them that they can't leave their homes as individuals, but then at the same time, they still need to go to work if they are one of these so-called essential businesses or services. The government is trying, our leaders are trying to not have the economy completely bottom out, but at the same time is trying to control people in their individual choices. It would be like saying, well, I live in a house where somebody's trying to sleep and I don't want to wake them up, so I'm not going to use the appliances in the house because they make noise. But then I need to practice for my drum solo because I have a concert tomorrow night. I'm kind of the master at crazy analogies at times, so I know that's kind of out there, but that's how I see this. It's like, if you're going to say, well, you need to go to work and basically work around potentially hundreds of other people, as long as you keep your social distance from those people of 6 feet, and as long as you sanitize your area and all that, you're keeping yourself safe. But the rest of the time, we don't trust you to do that. You need to stay at your home. That's not really a consistent policy. And what that says to me, because it doesn't really make sense, if you're considering fast food workers essential on one hand, but you're telling people that they shouldn't be able to go out and venture on their own unless they have a necessary reason on the other, what that says to me is you're not really trying to contain the coronavirus as well as you could. You're trying, like I say, to balance economic and health interests, and you're essentially not wanting people to panic. I think that's really what this stay-at-home order is about. Making it to where people don't freak out because they think nothing's being done. But then at the same time saying, oh, you still need to go to work if you're anybody on this essential list. And even with this list of essential jobs, there have been a record number of people, of course, filing for unemployment and whatnot. And that's the rub with all this, is that some of the businesses that are considered essential are shutting down anyway, because the overall economic impact of this virus is making it to where even the so-called essential businesses, like I know of a few different businesses, a few different industries from relatives and friends that I have, are shutting down. Even though they would be considered essential on this list, they're shutting down anyway because either people are sick or they don't have customers to buy their product and services anymore because of the whole coronavirus epidemic, or pandemic as it is now. So from the perspective of the state, I think what this is basically is we could shut down these jobs if we don't want to because it's going to hurt the economy too much, more than it's already been hurt. But at the same time, we're going to risk people's lives and well-being by considering them essential. We don't want even more people drawing unemployment. We don't want the state to be financially overwhelmed. And like I say, we want to keep the economy afloat as much as we can. So we're just going to tell people they can't go anywhere so that they think that somehow this is going to prevent the coronavirus from spreading, even though we're having them work together at jobs that are really debatably essential or not essential, really. I really think that's the motivation here. I will say that I don't think it's necessarily about taking people's rights away in the long run, because I don't think that they can get away with that. I think people would eventually start to get upset. But I do think it's a matter of, well, let's act like staying at home and not letting people leave is going to keep everyone safe, but then we don't want to face the economic consequences of that if we're consistent and say that, well, you don't need to go to work either unless you're absolutely essential. And there are debates that you could have about what is and what isn't essential. But when I see fast food and laundromats and Home Depot and the marijuana industry as as essential businesses or services, I can't believe that this is really like taking people's health serious to the extent that you value it above everything else. That's clearly not what it is. It's trying to balance economic interests with kind of keeping people in this virus contained, but not at the same time, not really, because again, you're saying people still need to go to work if they fall into one of these categories or one of these lists. So I really just don't think it's going to be enough. And again, I think the stay-at-home order really amounts to, well, we don't want people freaking out over this. We don't want people to get together in large numbers. We want people to stay at home, but most people are going to elect to do this anyway, just using common sense as individuals. But if we pass the stay-at-home order and act like it's a big deal, that's going to reduce the number of people that are panicked. That's going to help them basically feel better. And so they could still go to work the next day and potentially expose themselves to this virus because we need them to work at the laundromat or at Home Depot. And again, I think it's about trying to balance economic interest with protecting people's health. But really, it's not going to do either one of those two things successfully, because if people who really, like I say, are not essential still have to go out there and work, they're still going to spread the virus to other people if they have it. And then at the same time, the economy is not going to do well with all this anyway, because like I say, a lot of industries are going under even if they are essential. So they're not going to have either one. But yet I think that in Ohio and a lot of other states, the government's trying to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to balance these economic interests with healthcare interests, and then it's not going to do either one effectively. That's kind of my criticism of what's going on. Otherwise, why wouldn't this stay-at-home order only include truly essential businesses and then say you can only go out if it's for a necessity? Why tell individual people that you can't go out, but then groups of people can get together at work? And I don't mean get together in the sense of partying, but just that you work in the vicinity of those people, no matter how much social distancing and cleanliness and sanitation you try to use. It just doesn't really make sense to tell people that they need to go to work in those environments when they're not absolutely necessary, but then say you need to stay at home the rest of the time. That's not a consistent policy, in my opinion. The last point that I want to make about this topic is how people in my area overall are reacting to the stay-at-home order and to the overall situation as well. There are a lot of people who are totally on board with having the government tell them what to do without even analyzing this or thinking about it or seeing some of the inconsistencies that I've mentioned in this video. There's an alarming, at least alarming to me, number of people who on social media or even in terms of just some of the things that they say, even off of social media, that if you don't do this, then you need to be put in jail. Or if you don't obey this order, then DeWine, our governor, needs to give you another month of not being able to go out and being, self-quarantined and all this stuff. And it's like, you really are going to just say that taking away people's right to leave their home, which I would argue is a basic natural right to leave your home as you choose under most circumstances. I'm not saying that this isn't an exception. I think that it probably is. But to say that we're just going to do whatever the government tells us, if the government says stay home, then you better stay home. And you see people trying to really act as if anyone who disagrees with this is immoral. And again, I kind of understand it because of the pandemic, but it seems to me like it's not really about that for a lot of people. It's just that the government tells them to do something, and so they do it. They think it must be the right thing to do. And honestly, it concerns me greatly because I didn't think we were quite there in my society, at least not in a state like Ohio, which is not really generally considered to be like a big government state compared to a lot of other places. To some extent, it's kind of a rural area. I thought people would be more resistant about the government just telling them what to do. And I was kind of concerned to start off with that some people would just say, I don't care what the government says, we'll just do whatever we want. But I've actually seen the opposite. An alarming number of people are just like, well, the governor says this and our state government says this. So, and even people, who are traditional conservatives or some other form of conservative that like Trump, they're like, well, Trump says this, so we got to do it. And it's like, are you serious? You're not going to evaluate having a major freedom like this taken away? And I know it's not a constitutional right. I understand the right to free travel is not in the Constitution anywhere, and that's fair enough. But it makes me wonder how many of these same people, if someone said, well, we don't have due process now because of the coronavirus. We can't go out and have free speech. Free speech doesn't exist as long as the coronavirus is out here because we need to do what the government says. I wonder how many people would buy that type of argument. It seems to me like there's a large number of people that would just say, oh yeah, and if you don't do what the government says, you're bad. It's really concerning to me that many people, I would say over half the people in my area, maybe I'm seeing things, maybe I'm misinterpreting how people are reacting. Maybe if it wasn't for the particular nature of this event, people wouldn't be reacting this way, but I don't know. It seems to me like a lot of people, maybe not the majority of people, but a lot of people are just like, you have to do what the state tells you or you're wrong, you're bad, you're doing something immoral by not agreeing to have your right to travel taken away because of this coronavirus. And to me, it's like, no, I can understand people being resistant against this. And like I say, in this case, the right thing to do probably is to not leave your home. Well, I think it clearly is. The right thing to do is to not leave your home unless it's for a necessity because you don't want to get this virus. But to say that you have to do this because the government tells you to, that seems to be the argument that I hear more often than anything else. And that's very concerning because I think a lot of these people would follow certain leaders right off a cliff, the way that they act. They would just do whatever certain levels of the government tell them to do. And so that's my second major criticism or issue with what I see going on. The first is the law is not really consistent. The stay-at-home order is not really consistent if it's really all about protecting people's health above everything else. I don't really see that. I see it as trying to balance economic interest with the interest of people's health. And I don't see either one of them being protected very well because you can't really do that, in my opinion. The economy is going to be in bad shape after all this. So why say that certain businesses are essential when they're not? Why try to protect the economy in that way? Other than, again, it's kind of about what is in their political interest of the leaders that we have. Not saying that you can't be reasonable and try to balance economic and healthcare interests, but you can't on one hand tell people, well, you have to stay at home, but you also have to go to work. It just, again, the coronavirus doesn't care whether you've been labeled as an essential worker or not. So it should really truly only be the essential workers that are going to work now. And then the other issue, like I say, just to summarize, is that a lot of people seem to be really eager to have the government take their rights away. And more people, more conservatives who are eager to have that take place than what I counted on, than what I expected. And that's a little bit unnerving, but it is what it is. Like I say, maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe it's just because of what this coronavirus is. People are thinking about it and they're just reaching the correct conclusion. They're not just doing this because the government tells them to, but from what I can see, a lot of people are pretty much taking the actions that they're taking and just saying, well, the government says this, so you better do it, or I'm going to watch you. It seems like some people are really reacting that way, an alarming number of people, in my opinion. Like I say, it's somewhat unnerving. So if this situation continues, I've heard some people say that, well, this is going to be the worst week coming up, the week of the 6th, the week that I'm making this video. This is going to be the worst week. I've heard other people say that it's going to continue to be bad for several weeks before it peaks, and that this can continue to be a major problem, not just in terms of its economic impact, but it could be a health problem all the way through the summer. So I don't really know what's going to happen, but like I say, I think that this attempt to really kind of bounce economic interest and health interest is going to fail, because a lot of these industries, whether they're considered essential or not, are going to go under. And so to me, it makes sense to just say, well, only the truly essential businesses are going to continue to be able to operate. Trucking, gas stations, grocery stores, and healthcare, and then your emergency services, and that's basically it. And you could argue what else you should or shouldn't have on that list of truly essential businesses, but to me, that's basically the list. Either you say, hey, we're going to have a revised list and the economy is going to be in bad shape, but we have to deal with this based on how it's going to impact people's health for real. Or, and this isn't the option that I would suggest, you could just say, well, it's going to do what it's going to do. We might as well lift the stay-at-home order. We might as well let people do what they're going to do and just try to use common sense and let the individuals decide this, because this thing's going to do what it's going to do. We're not willing to let the economy tank. We're going to do what we have to do to preserve the economy. We're going to try to continue to buoy the economy through this pandemic as much as we can. And it's sad, but people are going to die, and then eventually we're going to be over this and we're going to recover. Again, I don't like that because it's saying that the economy is more important than people's health, but that's your other option. The sort of middle of the road, try to have our cake and eat it too, by labeling fast food businesses as an example as essential, but then saying you can't leave your home the rest of the time, that's not going to work as far as really stymieing the spread of this virus. It will to an extent, compared to if you just said, hey, have at it and go do what you want to do. But again, people are going to suffer because they have to go to work in this environment when it's really not necessary in many cases. And they're going to spread it to other people that they live with and everything else. People that, that aren't considered essential and are staying at home. Well, if people are going to work and getting this still, then they're going to spread it to people that they live with. So it just doesn't really make sense, other than, again, I think the stay-at-home order is really meant to try to manage the economy as best they can, as best as our leaders can, and then at the same time say, well, we're going to keep you at home because that's for your health, and we're going to protect your health. Well, really, if that was the emphasis, this essential business list would not be what it is, in my opinion. So again, that's my criticism of this. I'm not going to say that they're not trying to do the right thing, the people in leadership positions in my state, but again, I think they're trying to balance people's health with economic interests, and that it's not going to turn out too well if we continue this way. What I would like to see, again, is this essential business list be shrunk down quite a bit to the people that actually are essential. That would be how you actually really limit the spread of this virus. But I think instead, we're going to have kind of a negative result with all this. We're going to have more people get sick for a few weeks. A lot more people are going to get the virus because people are still spreading it around at work. And then eventually, a lot of these industries, a lot of these businesses are going to lay people off anyway. So I think you're going to see kind of a negative result on both sides with the economy and with people's health. And then when it's all over with, we can recover. I'm not going to say that we can't recover from this, but I just think that our leadership is trying to, like I say, choose a middle path where one doesn't really exist, and to kind of protect people, but really just prevent people from panicking while at the same time trying to keep the economy afloat. And I don't think that's necessarily going to turn out that well. If I'm wrong, guys, talk about how I'm wrong in the comments section. If you have a reasonable argument or whatnot for why I'm interpreting this in the wrong way, but that's my analysis of it. And, these are just really difficult times. We'll get through it together one way or the other. But again, I don't think that these policies are necessarily consistent. And again, people's reactions in some cases to just do whatever the government tells them to do, and they don't seem to be thinking about why it's all going on. Again, I don't necessarily disagree with their conclusions, but it is sort of unnerving that people just want to do what the government tells them to do in these cases sometimes, when, like I say, these policies are not the best and not what they could be, in my opinion, going forward. I think we could be doing better, but at the same time, it is what it is, and we'll just have to get through it the best we can, and then we'll recover from this. But it'll take a while in order to achieve that. That's just how it is in this case.